Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is in your hood. I am absolutely Adia.
I'm your girl, Ashley Nicole.
I am the franchise.
And my name is CP3. And we most definitely have a special guest in the building. His name is Dr. Jared C. Avery.
What's up?
Welcome to the building, sir.
Appreciate it.
Long-time friend. Guy I met at a racial equity meeting. TCU, we connected and hope we could most definitely keep going with the future projects that we have. And Louisiana native.
Sir.
McMahon in 2003. Yes, sir. Dr. Jared Avery serves as a senior research analyst with the Quality Education for Minorities Network. And he also researched and responsible for collecting and analyzing quantitative and qualitative data on topics related to persistence and educational experiences. And you graduated from Louisiana State, right?
Yes, sir. 3-time graduate.
Cool. And you taught at Howard, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
I heard you for the 3 times.
Man, you talking about some credentials up in
Three
there.
times.
Bachelor's, master's, and PhD. So.
Oh,
Okay.
man.
Okay.
I'm feeling it.
I feel like I gotta go back to school.
Right.
No, y'all good.
Let me jump into somebody's
man,
course.
You know?
And we have a real special topic. Is college still worth it? College really still worth it? Going to school, investing your time, your money into college. And we look at today's wealthy people, and it's easy to question the worth of college. Growing up in American society, it always told us and taught us to like go to college, get a stable job, go buy a house, get married with kids.
American dream.
Yeah, the American dream and the wealth and success. So my question is college still worth it? The investment that we put into what we have, is it still worth it?
Well, I think, well, first and foremost, thank you guys for just inviting me to be a part of the podcast.
Yes, sir.
Definitely.
Yes, sir.
And just the conversation. I think it's a meaningful conversation and one that's worthwhile. And I definitely look forward to a great one. I think in terms of just higher education and where we are right now, I think the reason why a lot of folks are bringing that particular topic and particular question into focus is the fact that, overall, if you look at Americans, we owe $1.48 trillion in terms of student loan debt. And if you look at, college graduates that recently graduated, the average percentage or average dollar amount of debt is approximately $40,000.
Right.
And so, when we look at that, we look at the fact that a lot of students really they're going to college, number one, but really when they get to college, they aren't majoring in careers that necessarily allow them to pay back that significant student loan debt that they'll be hampered with then.
Exactly.
And obviously, if you look at minorities and underrepresented populations, black and brown folks in particular, you look at the fact that overall, we come from less resource communities than majority populations. And so when you look at it in that sense, the question remains, is it still worth it? My answer to that is yes.
Okay.
Before we kind of get into the weeds and overall conversation, I think it's important to contextualize it first and foremost. So Chris and I, we've had this conversation, I think Adia a little bit, but I'm a big historian. I really believe in contextualizing context, really giving people a sense of where we are, where we've been, and where we're going. Overall, just higher education has been pretty much designated and premised within the period that it's been in. I mean, you can go all the way back to the 1600s where you had the non-colonial colleges, Rutgers, Harvard, Columbia, so on and so forth, that originally served to really provide education for a select few individuals. I mean, we pretty much know who these select individuals were.
No, who are they?
And we know, white males pretty much. And pretty much what they did was they propagated a system of white patriarchal capitalism, which pretty much focused on the idea that, for all intents and purposes, that white males will pretty much govern society, right? From an economic, from political, all this particular standpoint. And so when we look at it, these individuals are pretty much from privileged families. So pretty much if you had money, you had the opportunity to go to these non-colonial colleges. They're pretty much based on the European model of college and going away and so on and so forth. So transition to that point, beyond that point, we look at the agricultural industrial period, 1800s, where we pretty much see really open access, kind of, not necessarily open access, but really colleges and universities being more open to education of more populations, mostly poor whites, of course, African Americans post Civil War, Reconstruction era. And really there's two designated policies that really give premise to this idea of access, right? There's the two Morrill Land-Grant Acts, which are named after Senator Justin Morrill for Vermont. And pretty much the first act in 1862 pretty much said that, hey, the federal government has a whole bunch of land. We're going to donate this land to the states with the premise of educating their citizenry. And this particular land was in these colleges that were established were pretty much designated for both agriculture and technical education, as well as mechanic arts educations. And so if you look at that particular period, you know, obviously kind of going back to the antebellum period, past the after the Revolutionary War, the nation building idea was, hey, we need people to run the country. Fast forward, 1800s, now we need people to produce these goods, to get this money, to really build this country's wealth. And so you see a direct correlation between the premise of the colleges from industrial, agriculture, mechanical-based education towards that. Fast forward, 1890, the first Moral Land Act provided education and access colleges for white individuals, majority population. 1890 for black colleges and universities. So you see a lot of the 1890 land grant institutions in the South, Louisiana, Texas A&M University, Southern University are part of the 1890 land grant institutions were designated for black people and focused on agriculture and technical education. And so really what's interesting is college really hasn't been a thing until, or really hasn't become a thing until like probably the past like 100, 150 years if you really think about it, because only a certain amount of people were really
given. When college started, it was for religious purposes, like in the 1600s, it was for religious domination.
Clergy, you know, folks that were aspiring lawyers, other politicians, and so on and so forth. Exactly. And so really we haven't really seen an explosion in terms of college in itself and what is being known today, you know, really post World War II with the GI Bill, which expanded education even more, which pretty much the federal government got more involved to say, hey, we want our citizenry to become more educated. And even also in the 1960s, as part of President Lyndon B. Johnson's Great Society agenda, where there's a Higher Education Act and other kind of policies that really expanded access for populations of people well beyond those that were part of the majority. And really HEA is significant because the Higher Education Act, because it really allotted certain funds and certain grants and certain loan opportunities from the federal government to directly go to the states as well as the students. And really that exploded education, higher education in particular. And so I think where we are right now in higher education, and you can point to that particular period as a direct correlation to, of course, the Cold War and some of the things that were happening in terms of U.S. competitiveness globally in the world stage. And I think where we are right now, and I think we can't underestimate the impact that the recession had in the 2000s, where tons of states has pretty much taken a step back in higher education and what it means to go to college and what it means to be active and involved. And understand that, hey, this higher education college thing is no longer a public good, but it's more of a private good. So we're going to say we're going to de-invest in higher education and we're going to flip the bill to students and the parents. And so, I mean, there's other policies that were involved with that in terms of Parent Plus loans, really the restrictions with that particular policy and, you know, kind of other sort of things. But, you know, and it all kind of corresponds to the student loan debt. You know, obviously, you know, when parents and students have to flip the bill, you know, you better be going to college and getting a degree that pays you money after you get out of school. I mean, if not, you're going to be sack loaded with debt. And so, you know, I think it's important, you know, when we kind of get to this conversation, is college worth it? I think we have to be really intentional of why we go and for what purpose and what purposes do we serve, but also understand the history that's behind it. And I think that's important to the overall conversation.
And I think, given my opinion, as far as like, is college really worth it? I would say yes or no. It all depends who is it for.
Definitely.
Because I think if you think about the professional degrees compared to just getting a bachelor's in something or like business and stuff like that, and if you have a certain goal that you want to achieve, is like opening your own business and stuff like that, I really don't think that you need to go to college as far as like going to into lectures. University is like doing it online to a local community college or something like that, and getting it way cheaper like that and not paying for these student loans. So that's what I think that's the problem for me, is for students to go into school just for, you know, certain degrees. Now, professional degrees like audiology and like certain like that.
I totally disagree.
Go ahead.
I think that's we do a detriment to the Black community because by saying, is college worth it, or you don't necessarily need that. True. You may not necessarily need that, but I think it's a lot of things that we assume that people know. And for the Black community, the majority of us, like we were talking about earlier, first-time business owners, you know, you coming from a background of people that never did the things that you're trying to do or have gone to places that you're trying to go. I think the biggest thing for me, my mom was the first one in our family to go to school and graduate out of 8 kids. I was the third.
Okay.
I went to Savannah College of Art and Design, Savannah, Georgia. We were too poor to visit. The first time we went there, I was being dropped off.
Yeah.
Like, good luck. I think college, for me, just the socializing, the networking aspect on that level was something that I wouldn't have gotten at home or had I not gone to college. And I think that the actual act of going to school for kids that, especially in public school, that have a different experience in going to college, and you're very responsible. You learn to be resourceful.
Definitely.
You see a lot of different perspectives of life. You meet a lot of different people from all walks of life. That changes you. It grows you as a person. And especially when you're talking about people that want to go into businesses, business owners and things like that, you need all of those experiences to help you relate to your customers, to figure out your target market, things like that. I think, of course, you can take a course online and learn that part, but the socialization part and making those personal connections can take you much further. Even with professors, I've had professors that were impressed upon me the importance of not just learning from the book, but taking the time to really learn from the people that you're in class with. I still have a lot of the majority of my business connections are from college.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. I also think that, when you talk about college and when you talk about, I think you mentioned it earlier, I think we have to be more intentional about, your purpose for going to college. I think too many of us in our community, if we decide to go, we go, and when we're there, we try to figure out what it is that we're going to do while we're there. And then we end up getting just a degree in anything just to finish. And then when we're out of school, because my whole thing is kind of what you mentioned earlier. Am I going to be able to graduate with a degree that's going to allow me to pay for the loans that I've accrued?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? And at least if I'm in that degree and I'm in that profession, once I finish college, then, I'll be able to, pay for my loans and be able to further my career. But if I'm not, it's almost like you're always behind the 8 ball, because you're paying for student loans, and you're also not even in a profession that's allowing you the amount of, or the salary to be able to afford paying for the student loans while also progressing in life and living your best life. You know?
Because like 54% of the people that go to college, especially in our community, don't go to school. I mean, they haven't finished in a degree and then doing jobs that they're not a part of the degree for.
But I think that speaks more to the college services that are supposed to help you post-graduation, job placement. I think that speaks more to that part, not necessarily going and getting a degree, but being able to find positions that are available in those fields and knowing how to get those jobs. Because, the joke is, you fresh out of college, you go apply for a job, and they want somebody with like 10 years experience.
Exactly.
And,
Well, what was interesting, Adia, and I think Adia and Frank, you mentioned an interesting point, one I want to highlight and definitely expand upon, and even you, Petrie. But as far as college graduates themselves, on average, they earn, just with a bachelor's degree, right, $51,000 compared to high school graduates, which are in the $20,000s. And I think there's something that could be meaningfully taken from colleges, in the fact that the amount of social capital that one gains in terms of meeting with people, right? I mean, there's people that I graduated with LSU that are doing some amazing things in terms on the policy, folks that are setting up, businesses, really folks that are really doing it that I have a direct connection to.
Right.
I can call these folks up, I can connect with these cats on Instagram, Twitter, or whatever, and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking about. How
this
can
is
you help?
my life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I think that's meaningful. I think there's also, though, a sense that we have to be more intentional on where we're going with college and what we're doing. And so, I mean, you can major. I mean, there's a running joke, right, of you can major in underwater basket weaving, but that doesn't necessarily necessitate you getting a job. I mean, you definitely have the experience of going to college, and and what I want to say is college. What I mean by that is the 4-year typical public private institution where you go off, you move in freshman year, all that kind of stuff, right?
The good life.
The good life, exactly.
Partying,
partying, athletics, all those sorts of things. But I think there's something to be said of being intentional when you're there. And really making sure you have the skills. And I think that's what we're moving towards today. I think we're moving towards a space where colleges can no longer say, hey, you're here. If you make it, it's good. If not, then hey,
now that part is something that we
touch
can.
on. Yeah. the importance. Like 2018 has been a big wave of graduates. Like there's been more graduates there have been in the past 5 years to me, just based on my social media and just paying attention to those graduates. Myself, personally did not go to college. I did try trade school. It wasn't for me, medical assistant, but it is what it is. Is it for you? It may not be, and it probably is. But my thing is, how do we continue to support the students that are, in school now and decrease the dropout rate?
Well, I think that's a good question, Nicole. And I think part of what we can do, and I think what a part of colleges and universities have been receptive to, is the fact that they're providing that holistic experience for students, right? Not necessarily saying, again, look to the left, look to the right of you, someone's going to be gone, right? It's more so we're focused on your education.
I remember doing that.
I remember that too.
Exactly. Like, we are partners within your education. We want you to be successful. And what's interesting is the fact that, some of the things that have been happening, and Chris didn't mention this, but part of the time that I spent in Washington, D.C. was also on the education policy front. So one of the things that I mentioned earlier in terms of 1960s, the Higher Education Act, is the fact that legislation is authorized every 4 years. And this year they're trying to reauthorize it again. And so one of the considerations that again, education as well as politics, all contextual, and they're taking that student loan debt into consideration and say, hey, colleges and universities, you want continued funding? You better make sure your students graduate within a 4 to 6 year period. And so there's this thing, the conversations that were happening in terms of skin in the game where, essentially colleges, in many ways, if they don't do certain things, they can be penalized for. There's one of the considerations. And there's other things that they're thinking about to really help ensure that colleges really are proactive. But I think overall the colleges and universities have been proactive among themselves to say, hey, we need to make sure that our graduates are successful. It looks better for them if, over 60% of their graduates go on to pursue careers in engineering, pursue careers, start their own businesses. I know that's like a big thing. And, one of the things I was a part of working in DC as in an education nonprofit sector was working with HBCUs in terms of fostering an environment that's inclusive of innovation, commercialization, and entrepreneurship, particularly as it relates to the technology space. And so they have to be successful. And I think the colleges are doing that. I think one of the critical pieces that they're doing is really putting students in those places, almost kind of like I compared it to like a mountaintop experience, right? You don't really know about it until you're actually there. You don't know what it really feels like to make real adult money as a college student unless you're there. And this could be an internship. This could be a work abroad program, research abroad program, whatever. Or it could be at your individual campuses where a lot of colleges are saying, hey, we're creating these nice places called incubator spaces and maker spaces where, hey, you're good in computer programming. You have a space to create your own business and own platform. I mean, cats like Mark Zuckerberg did it, and, there's other folks as well.
He graduated from college.
Exactly, but there's also...
And he started Facebook in his dorm.
Exactly. And there's also, a bunch of, black entrepreneurs that, we haven't heard about that are really making waves in this particular space. So we got to get behind it. But to your point, Nicole, colleges are being more intentional in the services that they provide and really saying, hey, we need to make sure that our students are successful.
And looking at the financial scope of like the student loan debt, it's like the African Americans top, white Americans and Hispanic by a $50 million margin, which is crazy. So could you provide any more information on how to go to college more affordable for the students that are listening?
Well, I think
people that are listening in general?
Yeah. Well, I think a big part of it, obviously, a lot of where we are is definitely contextualized, right? And I mentioned to you before, a lot of us have come from traditionally underserved and, under-resourced communities, and, myself included. My story is, not that different from you all, where, I grew up in New Orleans, Ninth Ward area, kind of mixed income kind of community. My mom actually went back to school after she had us as a teacher. Wow. My dad, blue collar, pretty much worked in the factory, majority, his whole life. And, he would always joke and say, I might not have gone to college, but I'm wise. And so I took that with me. And so, and he really is. And so, but with that, I think for myself, understanding the various programs that are available, as well as, of course, the other funding opportunities that are available. So for myself, I attended LSU underneath the, of course, Pell Grants, but also a TOPS program as well. So, and I know a lot of states are really having programs similar to like the TOPS program where, if you meet certain criteria within your state, if you have like a 3.0 GPA or score this amount on the ACT or SAT, you get pretty much funding for any public institution. Whether they subsidize it completely at 100% or 75%, there's funding opportunities out there for you. So that's number one. I would ask students who are listening to the podcast to look at those particular in-state opportunities that are available and really pursue those. I would, as much as possible, stay away from loans as
much as possible.
As much as possible.
Trap.
Exactly. Pell Grants are a good way. You know, you don't have to pay Pell Grants back. Yeah. It's a great way to go to school. You know, get funding from the federal government to go to school, work study programs as well, and really try not to really try to stay away from debt as much as possible because it doesn't go away.
What about a part-time thing? Like people going part-time? Yeah,
I've known a lot of people that have gone part-time, had part-time gigs. You know, nothing. I mean, folks have done that for years on end. You know, they have money on the side as well as to pay for school. So that's also an option as well.
One of the things I was going to add to what you said is portfolio scholarships and looking at things like that. Going to art school, I always go back to. There was a kid at my church that was interested in going to art school, and that was something that they hadn't spoken with him about. And I was like, no, you should really take some time, energy. And I was telling his mom, invest in getting some good photos taken of his artwork and really shoot for those things. I think it's a lot of things we automatically think financial aid when you're looking at paying to go to school, but it's a lot of money that you can get if you do the research and you start applying. So this is a great first half.
No doubt. Great first half.
Yeah, great.
Lots of information.
Wait, those are 25 minutes already?
Yeah.
Just quick, great conversation.
So thank you guys for tuning in and stay tuned, and we'll be right back with the quad.